Okay, welcome. Just wait a little bit for people to arrive. Okay, I'm going to kick things off. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this fourth and final session in our lively series on cities supporting cities toward the circular economy. I'm Trisha Hackett, a senior sustainable urban development expert for IURC North America. The International Urban and Regional Cooperation Program is financed by the European Union and brings together EU cities and global cities to share learning and experience on sustainable urban development challenges that range from sustainable mobility to urban regeneration to nature-based solutions, to energy efficiency in buildings, and to our topic today, which is supporting cities to move towards a more circular economy. Before we go any further, just a couple of housekeeping points. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded, and I will share a link afterwards with all attendees. This series has been delivered in close collaboration with friends and experts from Fort Collins, Colorado, which is a veteran of the IURC program, and from Metabolic, a Netherlands-based organization that have over a decade of experience advising businesses and governments and nonprofits from around the world on how to thrive in a circular economy, and also the support of our friends from Vila Nova de Famalicão. In the first session of this series last December, we heard from Fort Collins as they shared their journey. The journey their city is on toward updating their economic health strategic plan with a first-time focus on circularity. In our second session, we focused on policies, interventions, and strategies from city government and how they can support industrial manufacturing companies to implement circular economy business practice. We had a wonderful panel from the business private sector offering up some interesting and inspirational ideas for how projects they have underway, and also a wish list for city government. In our third session last March, we had a hands-on participatory workshop that was aimed at helping cities think through their very specific circular economy challenges and how to implement their new ideas. And today brings us full circle, bad pun intended. We hear about circular economy strategies, what circular economy strategies ended up in Fort Collins Economic Health Strategic Plan. And where they are in that process. We also have, again today, Erin Kennedy from Metabolic, who is accompanied through this series and may jump in with her expertise and reflections at different points. We also have some special guests joining us today to share with us their circular economy journey. So before I hand the floor over to our main presenter, let me introduce our special guests today. So first time we're very happy to have the city of Cleveland joining us in one of these sessions. So Kathy Len is here, and we'll let her introduce herself more later. And then we're very pleased to have veterans of the IURC city. So we have Maddie Morgan from the city of Austin, who focused on the topic of circular economy with their partner city Bologna in the first phase of the program, and Andrea Mafra, who is from the city of Vila Nova de Famalicão. And now I'm pleased to hand the floor, virtual floor, over to our lead presenter, facilitator, and guiding light of this series, Molly Saylor, who's a lead sustainability specialist for the city of Fort Collins. So over to you, Molly.
Wonderful. And good morning, everyone. As Trish already said, my name is Molly Saylor, but I also use she, her pronouns, which I just want to always include as part of how I introduce myself, and also share that I am joining today from the ancestral lands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. So I'm going to take just one moment and pull up my slides here so that I can talk a little bit about Fort Collins's journey as we have done some planning around the circular economy, and really want to highlight how we have been using this process, this webinar series, to bring content and ideas from other cities and from some of the experts that Trisha was mentioning, for example, on our friends over at Metabolic. So just to sort of recap and help us come full circle, but also really ending today, or ending my portion of this with what is ending up in our plan? What are our top strategies? And hopefully everyone will be able to really see the tight connection between all the work we've done through this series and those strategies. And then we've got, again, these friends from other cities on the line that can help share, as they're a little further ahead than Fort Collins, what we might want to reconsider before we finalize this plan based on their experience And so I just want to do a little bit of grounding in why Fort Collins does this work. So Fort Collins has a goal to be zero waste by the year 2030. This graph shows our historical progress. So we have already reduced our waste by about half, and we know how to get to about 27% remaining waste. We don't know how to do the rest, but we do know that there are only recycling markets, so ways to actually recycle things that can get us down to about 15%. And the last 15% we know is going to have to be redesigning systems for circularity. We can't actually recycle our way out of this problem to 100%. So knowing that, we are trying to integrate circular economy into many of our plans, our environmental plans, but also right now, our economic health strategic plan. So our economic health strategic plan is actually really intended to weave together different parts of the triple bottom line. So social sustainability, economic sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And the circular economy is such a wonderful really thing that we can do at the juncture of each of those. So we're really going to be integrating this into this strategic plan. And one of the really big sort of value cases for this is that this is our big opportunity when we are talking to businesses anyway about what a healthy economic system in Fort Collins looks like, to also talk about what does a circular economy in Fort Collins look like. So that is what we have been focused on since around last November, and we are getting toward the end. But I want to sort of pause and talk about how along the way this series has really one-to-one influenced our whole process. So we've had these 4 interactive sessions. We've had one where we learned from Metabolic about different frameworks. We had a business panel that brought together businesses in Fort Collins, and actually some of our businesses that we've met and actually started to have relationships with through our partner city in Portugal. Vila Nova de Famalicão is also on this session. Then we talked about the different categories of strategies and did some really great brainstorming with folks about what strategies could look like in their cities. And some of those are actually really starting to show up in our plan. And then today, again, is about lessons learned, and all the while really guided by our partners over at Metabolic. With this really key question in mind, right, of what do manufacturing businesses as one of the biggest levers really need from cities to be successful transitioning to a circular economy? So one of the first things we really heard from this frameworks is to think beyond recycling. And that's what I was just noting in that first slide about, we know that we can't recycle our way out of this problem. So what else can we do? And these strategies are what we can do. And what we did is we turned that into an R pyramid for Fort Collins. So all of the examples here are actually examples that are from Fort Collins or from Colorado. And as much as we could stay even within our region, we tried to really highlight that there's a lot happening in this space. So this is now something that we're using to both talk about the framework around our strategies, but also to highlight the existing leadership and the existing momentum. And we've also used this to talk about how a few leading companies doesn't make a whole economy. So this is a slide we've already shared with our city council and will undoubtedly be showing up in our plan to really sort of start to set the stage about existing conditions. In that second webinar, we had this great opportunity to talk to some of our businesses, which actually was one of our best engagement moments that we had for our whole planning process, because our businesses felt really excited to come and talk to us, but also other cities, and have this bigger impact than just talking to Fort Collins. So we heard really interesting ideas about, what about changing zoning laws so that we could co-locate things that don't traditionally go together. For example, I think there was conversation around server farms and swimming pools or agricultural uses. We also heard that making sure we have the right recycling infrastructure in place so that businesses can have more recycled content is really crucial. And that was just a couple examples of these ideas. But I want to, in a moment, show then again how we've been presenting this to our city council. But I want to add a layer to this, because what we heard from businesses actually fit really well into what we talked about in our third session, which was the types or categories of circular economy strategies. So here, again, we talked about how there's the public awareness and education component, there's the convening and coordination elements, connecting to funding. So not necessarily having the funding as a city organization ourselves, but helping connect. And I'll talk a little bit more about something we heard from businesses more recently about the scale of what's needed there. Then we have the public procurement, which I'll admit, I thought was maybe the boring side of circular economy. And actually, I'm pretty convinced now that this might be one of our best pathways. Then we have the policy and the physical infrastructure. And so with those things, then we actually had this great session that I mentioned where we brainstormed a lot of strategies. These are all of your strategies that we came together and had this really interactive session around. And you'll start to see that there, if you were at that session, you may see some of the ideas here reflected in where Fort Collins is heading. So we were able to then have a great conversation with our city council about sort of introducing those categories of circular economy strategies so that they can start to think about those, so that next time when we come back actually in August, we can say, these are the strategies and these are how this fits into these categories. But we paired those with quotes that we heard in our business panel to really show, like, this is where companies are at too. This is what they're thinking, and this is how this connects. So you can see here we had 2 inputs from Vila Nova de Famalicão, both our city partners and their manufacturer from textile, and New Belgium, which are actually businesses that we got to meet when we went on our first exchange. So that was a nice thread to be able to continue to tie through. But we went a little bit deeper than just this virtual series, and I want to bring that value into this too. So myself and a colleague actually had the opportunity to use some IURC funding that had gotten tangled up in COVID to go and to visit the city of Essen, who is an IURC city and has been really involved in this webinar series. We also got to visit Metabolic in Amsterdam, and then to visit our partners in Vila Nova de Famalicão, all within sort of the 6-week period, 5-week period of sort of end of April through May. And that has really been where we took the things that we've learned in this series and the things that we saw on the ground and put them into strategies. So I'm going to talk about our strategies here and then explain what you're seeing. I realize in almost every picture, you might ask yourself, what am I seeing here? So the first strategy that we have really fits in that awareness and education space. So that's really around identifying and collaborating on demonstration projects that have a lot of visibility both within the business community and at large in our communities. So we saw this really consistently throughout all the visits we were doing of really getting people to have a space that they can come and interact with the circular economy, with reused materials, with art, with the practical side of it. That actually goes a really long way in building the culture of circular economy. So what you're seeing in the top picture here, and actually in the bottom, is a space, a repurposed Air Force base outside of Amsterdam, where they have created incubator and startup office space, but also meeting spaces. And it is all using repurposed materials. So the top picture you can see actually was a Chinese food restaurant that closed down, and this is now a meeting room that you can rent. And we heard actually that part of what raising the visibility in the business community has meant is that KLM's green team comes and does meetings here. So they are really getting integrated into the circular economy just by being in that space. And then we also have Nessie here, which is made of old jeans from the company Mud Jeans, where you can rent jeans. And they took that to the Scotland, I think one of the Cope Scotland editions. And that was all about sort of the monster that is fabric waste. So really the things that people can interact with. So we'll be looking for some of those in our community. Then also connecting to funding. So helping businesses really navigate our government systems and connecting to funding for circular economy innovation. We heard that as circular economy businesses, the burden of innovation is so much larger. Some of these folks are pioneering recycling technologies that don't exist right now. And that has a huge capital burden for companies that are just starting up. And they talked about, yes, your city grants are nice, but they are missing a couple of zeros in terms of what it really takes. So helping make sure that there is a green financing fund and that businesses are able to access that. And that was, I think, different than the approach we had been considering, which would have been smaller dollar support. Then moving on to some convene and coordinate strategies. So we are planning to attract circular economy focused businesses, especially where they replace single-use plastics or close a gap that we know is sort of a missing link in other of our big industries. So we're talking now a lot about ecosystems and clusters. So we have a tech cluster, a beer cluster, But increasingly, we think we're going to need a lot of these businesses that are going to step into the space of replacing single-use plastics. So we think that we're going to need a strategy to get businesses to Fort Collins. So the picture that you see here with the big cup on top of the gas station, that is actually advertising a reusables company in Germany. So we saw that when we were in Essen, and they are really in the process of a massive conversion to reusables right now. On the other strategy, we want to really be able to support the development of circular ecosystems. The ecosystem approach is something that we heard from Metabolic and Erin when she talked about frameworks, but also really heard the one company I didn't take a picture with, Lupa Life, which is why it says Google it to learn more, because it's a really interesting company and concept that's making 100% post-consumer waste sweaters. But they talked about how important it is to not just convene people to generally talk about the value of the circular economy, but to bring people together to really talk about how we're going to get it done as a community, as an ecosystem, as a cluster together. And so we will be taking that idea forward with us, and heard the interesting comment that just convening to convene is not actually that helpful for an entrepreneur, that an entrepreneur who can't network on their own is not worth their salt. And so I think that was also a different perspective than what we had gone into this thinking. On our sort of final slide here about our strategies, we've got procurement and city resources. I already mentioned, I think this is an area I thought was maybe not the most fun side of circular economy, and now I'm actually like pretty excited about it. So we have heard and are going to try to update our city purchasing policy to support more of our city purchases being locally produced or circular products. And we heard from Mud Jeans, hey, if the city of Amsterdam really wanted to help us, they would put all of their outdoor workers in our jeans. And that makes a lot of sense. We also heard Erin tell us one of the things that the city of Amsterdam has done that's been most successful behind the scenes was actually making city spaces and land available. And so we'll have a strategy around that too, really trying to explore how our city resources can be an asset to companies trying to start up. And so what you're seeing here in these pictures are a houseboat office park that the city of Amsterdam made possible by making land available. And then also similarly, a very low rent space where the community can drop off sort of odd materials that get made back into sort of tourist items that have an Amsterdam theme. So I think this is a good time to hear from some other cities. So this is where we're headed. That's our short list of strategies. The wording is surely going to change before it's written in a plan. I'm sure there'll be a strategy or two that still end up getting added to the list. But we're pretty excited about this list. And maybe Maddie and Suzanne, or Maddie and Kathy and Andrea are already thinking in the back of their heads, wow, we thought that too. And that would be so helpful for us to know at this juncture before we finalize our plan. We still have so much ability now to pivot. And it's not all about our strategies either. I think there are many cities who have their own sort of actual list or mental list of what they'd like to do. So we'd love to hear from these leading cities about, what are their insights on lessons learned, having done this a little longer than some of the other cities. So I'm just going to ask each city to talk briefly about their main circular strategies to set that context, and then talk about some of the lessons learned and, if they could start again today, what might you do differently? So I will have Kathy from Cleveland come on and tell us a little bit about their city, and then we'll pass it to Maddie in Austin and Andrea from Famalicão. So stop sharing here, and Kathy, you can take over. Kathy, I think you're going to have to start again because you are unmute.
Sorry.
We really want to hear you.
Sorry. My name's Kathy Lynn. I'm the Sustainable Senior Manager for the Circular Economy for the City of Cleveland, based in the Mayor's Office of Sustainability. And Circular Cleveland was launched in 2020. But as Molly was saying, we still have a lot to learn. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you today and to learn from all of you. So as I mentioned, Circular Cleveland was launched in 2020 with funding provided by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, awarded to our partner, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. So the primary partners in Circular Cleveland and for the grant was, again, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, the City of Cleveland, and also Neighborhood Connections. Another very important partner has been the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And as I'm sure you all know, Ellen MacArthur Foundation is the global thought leader in the circular economy. And so we use their definition of a circular economy. And we're very fortunate to have them as a knowledge partner and meet with them on a monthly basis. And they are a great resource for learning more about what's going on globally for the circular economy. So these are the key deliverables for the grant. First, there was the development of the Circular Cleveland Roadmap, working with our international consultants. Then there was a strong community engagement component where we selected 8 Circular Cleveland ambassadors from 8 different City of Cleveland neighborhoods. And the role of the ambassadors was to serve as a liaison between the leadership team and their neighbors and other residents. Also, through Neighborhood Connections and their Neighbor Up grant program, we supported some neighborhood projects that residents were involved in, where they were practicing the circular economy. And we were very happy to see that even after the grant funding ran out, Neighborhood Connections included a category for future projects listed as sustainability or circular economy. And I should also mention here that what the feedback we got from Robert Wood Johnson and from Ellen MacArthur Foundation was that this is the part that they were really intrigued by, was involving the community through the ambassador program, but then also through the granting program. And we're also very happy that Ellen MacArthur Foundation is including Cleveland in their new podcast called The Circular Economy Show. And they will be coming to Cleveland in the fall to do some interviews and videotaping. Another component is a composting pilot program at the West Side Market, working with our partners, Rust Belt Riders, to do the composting, and also the Hunger Network to do food rescue from many of the vendors. We've also asked Rust Belt Riders to come up with a roadmap for us on how best to provide composting access to our Cleveland residents. And then lastly, we provided financial incentives for small businesses that were practicing the circular economy. So I mentioned the roadmap. The roadmap starts with 7 principles. And the first principle is that the city drives the transition from a linear economy to a circular economy. And I'm very happy that in completing one of those actions was initiating a new role in the city, which is my new position, which is manager for the circular economy for the City of Cleveland. The other principles include community engagement, private sector engagement, boosting local assets. One of the things we very quickly learned is that there's already a lot going on. So we want to definitely expand on the good that's already being done and help support those businesses and nonprofits. Also secure funding, have more transparencies of the urban waste inputs and outputs, and also regional collaboration. Now, I mentioned our international consultants. We were very honored to be working with Metabolic, based in Amsterdam, the Council for the Great Lakes region, based in Ontario, and also Pixera Global, based out of Washington, D.C. And after about a year-long process, these were the 4 focus areas that were identified as key for the transition for Cleveland to make to a circular economy. Those are circular manufacturing, the built environment, remediating pollution, and valuing our resources. Now, we did engage over that year-long process many of our stakeholders. We had 1 in-person meetup, and then rest of the stakeholder meetings were held virtually. One of the things that I'm doing now to move us forward is continuing with those conversations with our stakeholders one-on-one to learn more about what they're doing towards the circular economy, also what data they're collecting and suggestions on what we should be collecting, so that in a year, 3 years, 5 years, we can quantify our successes, and then also ask them about policy and what policies they'd like to see in place. So I wanted to start with what I think we did correctly. And I think that gets down to our partners. We really had some amazing partners. First, our funders, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And not only did they provide the funding, but like Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they also provide a lot of resources. We also meet monthly with representatives from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and their partners, C40 Cities. Again, Ellen MacArthur Foundation is always a wealth of information. I think we did pick the right partners for our consultants, working with Metabolic, Council of the Great Lakes Region, and Pixera. But also working with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress and Neighborhood Connections has been very rewarding, as well as our many other partners, including Cleveland residents. And one great example, I think, of these partnerships is with our Fix-It Cle repair workshops. We've been holding these now twice a month for the past year, and they started a little slow, but they're really gaining momentum now. And residents have really been key to providing coaching and mentoring for the residents that come in with their broken items. We've partnered with Case Western Reserve University and their Sears Think Box, which is an amazing maker space on campus. And then we've also partnered with the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District. Beginning in the fall, we'll be partnering with the Cleveland Public Library. So this has been a great example of a success and a partnership. But you asked, now to actually get to the question you asked what we would do differently. Well, ideally, we wouldn't have been doing all our planning during a pandemic. We had to hold many of our stakeholder meetings virtually. which is why I really appreciate the opportunity now to have these one-on-ones with our many stakeholders. And I think it would have been beneficial for us to have had some of these interviews either before or during the planning for the roadmap. We knew about some of the things going on in the circular economy space, and there are some great businesses and nonprofits already doing great work. But as I'm starting to get out in the community, I'm learning about so much more. Also, I mentioned that we've been working with community residents for our Circular Cleveland ambassadors. I think one of the things we could have maybe done better with that was in the selection of the ambassadors. I think we should have focused more maybe on those grant recipients that had gotten funding through the Neighbor Up grants. I think if we would have selected community residents as ambassadors that were already doing the work, I think we might have had a better program. And I think we could have also provided more trainings for the ambassadors and better communication. The last two things we are doing, but I think we could always be doing them better. One is the city has to lead by example. And so creating my new position, I think, was a great step forward. But any of us working for city or for a government know that things don't always move as quickly as we would like. So we are going to depend on our other partners to help move us forward. And then, as always, I think we could have done better planning, like right when we got the grant about what do we do next? What do we do when the funding runs out? And we do have plans, but again, I think we could have maybe done a better job there. And with that, I'm going to end my presentation. And here's my contact information and our website if anyone's interested in learning more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And I know that a lot of the lessons you were learning resonate with me, especially the statement about wishing things could move faster. I think with that, we'll go ahead and pass it to Maddie to add the Austin sort of flair to all of our circular economy. And I know if there's one thing Austin does well, it's add flair.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. I don't have any slides, so you're going to just have to listen to me, I guess. But I kind of just want to do a little bit of level setting because Austin is, I think, unique in the way it's set our city operates and sort of the political context as well. That also adds to some of our challenges. So in 2011, the city council set a goal to reach zero waste by 2040, which is defined as keeping 90% of all material generated in our community out of landfills and incinerators. And so we've been, working towards that goal for over a decade. We recently moved up into the 10th largest city in the United States, and we have about, I think it's 964,000 residents in Austin proper. And I think we're seeing our MSA is growing, more rapidly even than Austin proper. We as a city don't own or operate any processing facility. So we don't own a landfill, a MRF, a composting site. And so that can put us at a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of not being able to control, prices of tipping fees or, what material, we can write into contracts what materials are accepted in our from our residents, but it does put us at somewhat of a disadvantage there. But we do directly service about 200,000 single family homes. And then all of the commercial properties and apartment complexes are responsible for contracting with a private hauler on our open market. So we don't have any kind of like franchising system in Austin either. And so I think it was in 2015, we did a study of our waste stream and identified that the city only directly controls about 15% of the waste stream, and the rest is coming from the commercial and multifamily community. So we have some different policies in place to affect waste coming out of those types of properties and trying to increase diversion on that end. And then I think one of the most important things to note is that we are a progressive city located in the middle of an increasingly extreme state that has increasingly extreme conservative legislation. And we are often, they pay attention closely to what we're doing here in Austin at the state legislature, and often try to want to like undo what we're doing with regards to any kind of like sustainability things. And so that makes, implementing policies difficult. It also means that we don't have access to very much or any funding at all from a state level. And so that can make, running certain programs difficult because we just have what we can, have in our city budget. So about a decade ago, our team was a team of one, and it was focused on recycling economic development. And this is started as a partnership between Austin Resource Recovery, which is our solid waste department, and economic development. And there was an endeavor to build a remanufacturing hub to create more local in-markets here in Austin. And there were a couple of studies that were done, and the cost estimated what the cost would be to build out on our closed landfill and use that as a remanufacturing hub. And it was too cost prohibitive at the time, and we couldn't get city council to pass, the funds that we would need for that. So that plan was disbanded and sort of gradually morphed into the program that I run today, which is our circular economy program. And it sort of fits into or is part of sort of these other programs and policies that our department oversees as it relates to reaching our zero waste goal. And so the program I manage has 3 pillars. And we don't quite have a roadmap per se on circular economy. We do have a zero waste comprehensive plan that we're expecting an update on later this year. And in there, it, speaks specifically to sort of the work we're doing within the team that I manage. But what we have is 3 pillars. We have our catalyzing business innovation, which includes small business and entrepreneurship development. And within that, some of the things that were mentioned by both Molly and Kathy around cluster development. We do some pitch competitions and challenges and roundtables, really just acting as support for these, startup entrepreneurs, and then also early stage businesses and small and medium businesses to help connect them to resources that, we are aware of here locally, connect them with folks in the community who maybe they could partner with. And then also, as we're keeping tabs on what's happening globally through, networks like this one, getting them connected into the broader sort of a sphere of circular economy, and if there are potential, collaboration opportunities there. We also do some business. One of our tenants, I guess, is business recruitment. We found over the past, 6 years that that's been increasingly difficult for us without having a strong regional leverage. And that's because with city dollars, we can only support things that are located here in the city. And we don't have, a regional fund or anything set up to be able to tap into to say, set up in this county next to us, but still benefit our city. And so that is definitely like high on the list of things we want to work to create so that we can really actively leverage that. What we are beginning to see some success in terms of business recruitment and is not really sort of traditionally aligned with economic development is helping small and medium businesses expand their services to Austin. So while it may not result in, the creation of hundreds of jobs, maybe we're seeing 5 jobs created here because, reusable diaper service has expanded their services to Austin, even though they haven't, moved their headquarters or set up an actual office. They have remote staff here that are living in Austin and supporting this service. And I know Molly mentioned, replacing single-use plastics. We're actively trying to kind of do the same thing with a reusable dishware company, trying to help them demonstrate that Austin is a viable market and the demand is here from our current businesses, and create those partnerships to help them make that first step, into Austin and cracking into the market. Our second pillar is driving circular behavior change. And so this is really focused on the residential side. So all of the 970,000 people that live in Austin, trying to create programs and messaging and marketing to direct purchasing power and consumer behavior towards circular economy businesses and organizations. And so a couple of the things we have in there, our off-campus move-out program has been extremely successful. That was sort of a, grassroots, built with the community, sort of with all the stakeholders at the table, and that supports our, we usually work with 7 to 10 reuse organizations to redistribute material during that time of year. And then we also have our Fix It Austin programming that falls under this, and we have our traditional Fix It clinics, but we are actively looking to push ownership of physical Fix-It clinics and repair workshops over to our library branch through an interdepartmental agreement, so that we can free up our time and focus on piloting some new programs as they relate to providing repair service rather than education, to directly serve certain communities in Austin, kind of with a focus and emphasis on the equity lens, since we know that low-income communities and communities of color are typically the most harmed by things not being made well, and by things breaking and not being able to repair them or having access to repair services. So looking at how we can really, kind of help remediate that situation. And then our third pillar was touched on, I think that you both have in y'all's plan, but this leading by example. And so we are part of the Ellen MacArthur's Global Plastics Commitment and participate in the U.S. Plastics Pact. And then we have a project that is, bit off more than we can chew, I think, with how much staff we have dedicated to it. But it's our Circular City project, looking internally at our organization on how we can, target certain materials and what's happening in increase circularity in how we're purchasing, using, and then what's happening at the end of life. And I think at the end of the day, our hope is that we can, point some of these contracts back to supporting some of our local circular economy businesses. But there's a lot of steps we've got to do first before we can get to that point. And I would say that a huge lesson learned, we have 15,000 employees that work for the city of Austin. We have 30 departments. It's very decentralized, and we don't have a sustainable procurement, dedicated specialist in our central finance department. And so that's proving to be a little bit difficult, just because it means that we've got to be at every table that we want to see change made at. And right now I only have one full-time employee who's, kind of splitting her time on this project and sort of, another project. And it's a lot of work, and I think could require a whole team to effectively make change, be at the tables we need to be at, so that we can, interject certain language into contracts, or make sure that, things are, on track of where we want to see them. And I think that kind of brings me into some of the lessons learned there from some of our work is, don't overlook the power of having the seat at the table. Sometimes you just have to have your pulse on what's happening in order to sort of, correct the course of action or make sure that they're not forgetting circular economy, and sustainability are important points for the city. I failed to include at the beginning that in 2021, the city also released a climate equity plan, which has goals for 5 focus areas: sustainable buildings, transportation and land use, transportation, electrification, food and product consumption, and natural systems. I think the overarching goal of that's to equitably reach net zero community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. So I guess that might be our circular economy roadmap with different terms, but we have that in place, and we're actively involved and have been actively involved in how that's been created. But yeah, that having the seat at the table, I think, is just really important. It does take staff time, which, you have to kind of balance with other, projects and priorities you have going on. But I mean, we've seen sort of the other side of not having the person at the table. We've had a space on my team that was vacant for about 1.5 years, and this was our economic development liaison. So it's supposed to be half time with us, half time with economic development. And like we've lost some momentum there just because, I'm managing a team and I can't be at both tables, or at their table every single meeting, every single time. And so because of that, when they were doing their performance measures, I couldn't make that meeting. And so, doesn't explicitly state in performance measures we should be included in about circular economy. So I guess to that point too, of like, you can have these plans and you can have these stated like goals, right? Like we have an interdepartmental agreement between our 2 departments, but then when push comes to shove, like, because it's not on whoever was at the table was not on their, their specific job duties to focus on circular economy, it gets overlooked. And I think that's just something that will come with time and behavior change of like, working with staff too, of like that this is, I guess coming from direct leadership as well, right? Like outside of our department, although the leadership signed off on this agreement. So you would think they would be things they'd be thinking about. Anyways, not being at a table, you can lose some momentum and then have to like sort of restart up. Another one is just like be willing to test and pilot ideas. I know one thing that I love about my team is that we are, not really reporting or responding to like policies. And so we are able to create new programs and test them and see if they work. And if they work, figure out how we're going to run them. And
Maddie, just to jump in for a second.
Yeah.
Could you wrap up in about a minute or so?
Yes, I can. I think just with that is like, with adding these new programs, knowing that like, you've got to either sunset something or figure out where it's going to live in order to keep adding, new programs or initiatives to your plate. And that's definitely been something we've struggled with, of like, leadership knows that this reverse pitch program is super popular and like everybody knows about it. But I come back and say, well, it's not, really moving the needle towards, our zero waste goal. So I'm ready to disband it and do something bigger. And they're like, no, you can't get rid of it. People know about it. So it's this kind of, catch-22, I guess, of how you can then work within those confines and innovate it further. Yeah, and then just to touch lastly too on that regional collaboration, you'll have that mentioned in both of your plans. 100% agree with that as a necessary component, especially I think when you're talking about, trying to leverage funding, because as a city government in the United States, it's very difficult to get additional funding. I think we, know that here. And so having that regional collaboration is super important, I think, to move forward. Yeah, I think that's it.
Maddie, so much, again, similar to what I said with Kathy, so much resonates in a very deep way, especially around having enough people, and having just spent a lot of time with Andrea, I think she would agree too, that they could use a few more people to do their amazing work. So Andrea, why don't we pass it over to you to hear just a little bit about what you all do and what you would suggest that we and other cities would do differently, you know, if we were to, or what you would do differently and what we should do maybe based on those lessons.
Okay, I think you can hear me, right? And can you see the presentation? Is it correct? Okay, so I'll try to be brief. I work in the city department of strategic planning. I work with a strategic plan and support the city in developing projects for funded European financing. We have European, the national, and the regional guidelines that are very important for us. And in 2018, we started the work about circular economy with a big conference that where were integrated several thematic workshops with several themes such as water cycle and waste management, sustainable industry, and textile sustainability and circularity. We also, in 2019, presented the IURC Action Planning Network proposal, and in 2020, we started to work in the design of an integrated local action plan focused on a new generation of resourceful cities for waste prevention, reuse, and recycling. We also supported some local parishes to develop proposals for national funding related for the implementation of community projects and neighborhood projects for circular economy. And these were very important for us. We have a very limited competences in some sectors. For example, we have competences larger in waste collection and water supply, but we don't have any kind of competences for energy production and management, for example. And also, considering the city characteristics, we are able to identify two main areas to focus on: the local community and also the business and industrial sector. And this was also the two main areas identified in the integrated action plan that I mentioned, that it was built with the IURC project. So, considering these two main areas, some of the municipal competences, as I mentioned, are water cycle management, waste and bio-waste collection, and the city can also have a relevant influence in the community and have a big role in citizens' behavior change. And in the last year, when we finished the integrated action plan for resourceful cities, we had a small-scale action, the zero waste market for a circular market, that it was very important to bring the community to work and to work with the community with several events that were already mentioned by other cities, like Repair Cafe and projects to reduce the food waste. I will also highlight two domains that we were working with the community and with the local entities. We work with schools, with the Eco Schools project and a circular furniture bank. The Repair Cafes events were made by the schools. And we also worked with these parishes, as I mentioned, for the circular parishes projects. What works here? We think that both the zero waste market and the community projects, with them, the citizens increase their awareness for circular economy in daily life, namely related with the food waste and the upcycling projects to reuse. And also local partners were qualified, and now they have the minimum infrastructure and the materials to maintain their projects, and also new small projects have emerged. What did not work so well? There was a change in the council member responsible for the municipal market, so we have a disruption between the previous team and the new team now. Eventually, we should have a previously clear strategy with specific guidelines for the teams to work in the future. Also, the COVID pandemics has weakened some of the community dynamics in the neighborhoods and in their projects. And eventually the city should boost and try to give some freshness to that project. Eventually, the city needs to have a follow-up methodology, even for the community project. Sometimes we have it for our projects, but we would need eventually also for the neighborhood projects. In the other area that I mentioned, the one that the city has less competences and is more limited to act, the actions were focused in giving support to the private initiative and to instigate new ideas and partnerships. Here, the city tries to be a facilitator and a mobilizer to the private action. Famalicão is an industrial city, and when we start to talk about circularity, immediately we think in industrial symbiosis. But this is the hard part of the issue. This is the thing that didn't went so well, I think. We obviously supported some projects. However, it's very hard to work on industrial waste and industrial symbiosis because there are very specific rules and we can't do anything on that. And for example, this team requires a very high level of technical expertise, and that usually the municipality doesn't have, and therefore we aren't able to directly influence the industrial sector. For example, we cannot present feasible solutions for industrial symbiosis, but only superficial ideas. I can say that the manner from an intensive animal production can be used for biogas production, but I'm very far away from knowing if our animal farm can indeed implement it. And this is even harder when we talk about agro-food, textiles, and metalwork that are our big sectors here in the city. However, we support projects for industrial symbiosis, yet with not very relevant impact. Eventually, we will need to wait a little more until we have more knowledge about what the municipality can or should really do. So we have also a lot we have a strong entrepreneurial community, and here it's where I think we made a big difference. With our Famalicão Made in program, we support entrepreneurship for sustainability and circularity. Because the future of our economic sector for industry and for small and medium-sized enterprises depends on their ability to be more sustainable and circular. And as a reference, we have a lot of projects like GEM, that is an idea contest, or the elevator, similar programs that Austin has to push and to support startups in new and emerging areas, and we have them. We have 5 small incubators for startups, and one of them is specifically for sustainable startups. Also, what works, it's indeed the program Famalicão Made in and all this economic ecosystem, and the city as a facilitator to boost partnerships between the public and the private sector, mainly between companies and with the research and investigation sector. Very relevant is the work that we are doing in repurposing spaces for sustainability and circularity. We have one startup incubator inserted in Rio Pel, a giant textile. In a small part of their building was created a space for incubation, acceleration of innovative business ideas, and a group of startups benefit from these dynamic contexts, and new projects already emerge here inside this startup that is inside the textile. And we also we are creating, or we have recently created, the Center for Innovation, Research and Higher Education. That is this picture on the lower left, yes. This was a private school complex that went empty when the school closed in 2019, and the city bought this whole complex and is transforming it in a technological and innovative hub. And I think we can here repurpose the old space and also boost innovation for sustainability. We have there a technological area with Agro-Food Competence Center. We have Universidade do Minho with 11 laboratories and 2 spin-offs. We have an education area with 1 higher professional courses with 12 universities and 500 students. And we also have here a space for incubation. And besides that, a dance school and a chess club. And we believe that here we can put people together and push innovation for circularity and sustainability. I have a list of what would we do differently. I will try to make it briefly. Maybe we could include more departments in the design of the integrated local action plan. And try to guarantee that all council members are a participative part in this emerging issue. It was very hard because in the beginning, this theme, the circular economy, was with the Department of Economy, and then it changed for environmental economy, environmental department, and this changes, and people without knowing where should it be, what each department should do, and why they should do it. It's very important to have that in mind. I think I can stop here. Molly.
Yeah, I realized that we are at 9 in Colorado time. This is a global thing, so whatever hour it is just turned for you all. Some folks may need to move on to other meetings, but we are just gonna wrap up here and sort of say thank you to our presenters. I did want to just say I really heard some strong themes that, I think we tend to think about circular economy about being all about the materials, and actually what I think I heard today is that it's actually all about the people having the right capacity, the right people at the right tables at the right time, having the right people working on it. That was really a connecting thread that I heard across everyone. The right partners, right? That was one of Kathy's reflections. So I know that's something I'm going to be taking back to our team to really consider. And we, I think, are going to drop the link of the Miro board that we had used several times throughout this series to capture all of the great ideas. We have a prompt in there for you all. If you look for a big blue box, there's a prompt about what you are taking away from this series. We'd love if you can use the sticky notes to tell us what value this brought to your work and if you're going to be able to integrate any of these concepts going forward. We'll put the link in and let you access that on your own. And I think just from my side, Fort Collins has had tremendous value from learning from all of you, and we will be adapting many of your good ideas. And I will pass it back to our hosts at IURC to really close us out here.
Great, thanks so much. And just a really, really big thank you to Molly and Erin Kennedy, who've been so involved in this whole series. It's been the first time that we've ever had a webinar series led by one of our cities. And I think it's been great, and we've gotten real value, and we've heard great feedback from the cohort of peers that have been involved in this. And I also want to thank our special guests today, Kathy and Madeline, and of course, Andrea Maffer from Vila Nova de Famalicão, which has also been supporting this webinar series and has a great partner as always. So, we really appreciate your time, and we know that it's never enough time, but this sparks other conversations and connections, and we've already seen that happen. We don't have time to go into details, but there's some wonderful exchanges in real life that have happened because of these online sessions. So that for us is a really big win, and that you're also generous sharing and also really honest about what are your challenges. And that's the idea of this peer-to-peer learning. So just thank you to Susana Arellano and Colabolum, who's behind the scenes organizing the logistics to make this happen as well. Susana has popped into the chat a link, two links. One is for the survey, which if you take 2 minutes and fill that in, that would be great to help us know about planning future sessions. And also we have a web page dedicated to this series, which has recordings from all the sessions, and we will be sharing a link to the recording and the 2 presentations with everyone who joined us. So with that, I just want to wish, I think I've thanked everybody. Yes, that's very important. So wishing you all a good rest of your morning or afternoon, wherever you are. And this has just been, for me personally, a wonderful opportunity to be a part of this series. And I know I've learned a lot about circular economy, and I know the rest of our cohort has too. So thank you very much and have a good rest of your day.